Namaste, everyone, and welcome. So here we are with Anchor the Light. Before we start, one second. Okay, before I start, what's with the sound? Okay, let's try that again. Atma Namaste, good morning. Here in the United States, good morning. So before we start, let's ask for blessing. To the Divine Supreme God, Divine Father, Mother, to all the spiritual elders, holy masters, to all the saints of all traditions, archangels, holy angels, and spiritual helpers. Personally, to my teacher, Master Tokok Sui Mahaguju Mailing, we humbly ask for divine light, divine love. Thank you for your guidance, help, healing, and divine protection. We thank you in full faith, and so it is. All right, so there's a deep teaching in the Buddhist tradition called emptiness. And I just want to cover that a little bit because it's caused a lot of confusion. And we covered a little bit in during the Wesak talk. Let's dive a little deeper, okay? So there's this great teacher in the Buddhist tradition, Nagarjuna, who talks about two main topics that... number one, anatta, no self, and emptiness. So they're actually interconnected. Let's go to it in a little more detail. And let's start with emptiness. So unless you understand it in context, there's a tendency for confusion. And most people, they look at it like, and I've actually read chats where it says, oh, there is no self, everything's empty, and so on and so on. They go on and on and on. And the first question I ask is, if there's no self and everything's empty, who's talking? Who's chatting? Who's communicating? Right? And so when it was, let me see, make sure everything's good. All right? And when I studied it further, it just got more confusing. And then luckily, blessings of the teacher, Grandmaster Tokok clarified everything. But let's just dive a little deeper first in what is the Buddhist context of emptiness. So the first thing we think of is emptiness means nothing. And when you always see this box, this image of a box, which I'll show you again, like an empty box, right? So many years ago, oops, let me just get this out of the way, 1 second. So many years ago, during my birthday, my assistant Carla gave me a card from the students. And it's a happy birthday card. On the front, it has an image of the Dalai Lama opening up an empty box. And he opened it, it's like this little thing that he says, ooh, what I've always wanted. Nothing. Nothing. And of course, it's trying to be funny, saying that on one end, in the Buddhist tradition, or the Tibetan tradition, you came in with nothing, you want to leave with nothing, and there is no accumulation of material things. That's one context. Again, you have to understand that in spiritual teachings, truth can be understood on many levels. Okay? First level of truth, second level of truth, and so on and so on. So what happens is something like this. On one level of truth, emptiness means there's nothing there. However, in the Buddhist tradition, when they say emptiness, it means if a cup is empty, the first question is empty of what? It's empty of water, empty of any contents, right? But in reality, what they're saying is everything is not having intrinsic essence. Everything is made up of something. So the way one of the great teachers said is, emptiness, like everything is everything. If this remote control is empty, means it's empty of self-nature. It's made of plastic. It came from the factory. It came from somebody's idea. It's not by itself self-existent. It was an aggregate or put together by something. So it takes a little bit of understanding that everything is non-existent by itself. It actually came from somewhere, or it's a combination or aggregate of many, many factors. That's what emptiness means in the traditional Buddhist sense. Same thing with the self. Okay, listen carefully. So on one end, they say, there is no self. The problem is, if you just understood it on face value, there is no self. If there's no self, if I slap you, you can't complain because number one, there's no I, there's no self, so nobody slapped you and nobody got slapped, which is ridiculous. And yet, some people, they don't dive deeper, they just stay with that and just keep going. So the deeper meaning of no self is twofold. Number one, what most people call the self is actually a perception of all the thought forms, the emotions that that person created about the self, including, who am I? I'm my father's son. I'm a father. I'm a brother. I'm an engineer. I'm this. I'm tall. I'm short. I'm happy. I'm sad. All of these are aggregates put together that I perceive as the I. So in the Buddhist tradition, they said there is no I, there's no self, because the self is actually a combination of all these perceptions only. Are you with me so far? So you put the two together. That's why traditionally they say there is no self and there's only emptiness. So you have to understand it in that context. That's what they mean by emptiness. So emptiness and nothingness are used interchangeably, but they're actually not the same. So let's get to the high level of truth. The high level of truth is as simple as this. When you say nothingness, it means no thing. Like when a Buddhist monk is meditating, what are you doing? I'm meditating on nothing. So one of two things. One, they're meditating on emptying their mind completely and realizing that everything is an aggregate or combination of everything. So if you boil it down to or distill it down to the essence, there's nothing in the universe that is by itself. Everything is a combination of everything, which is actually not correct. It isn't. You know why? Let's talk about it. If you take any item, you tear it down, it's down to components, right? Plastic, rubber, the PC board that's inside, which is made of transistors, chips, you break it down, molecules. Molecules are made of atoms. Now, of course, the word atomos, if I'm saying it right in Greek, means indivisible, which we later found out is actually not true. An atom can be further divided. When the atom is further divided, you have electrons and you have nucleus. And you dive deeper, an electron can be subdivided, the neutron can be subdivided, right, into quarks. Is that quarks? Yeah. And so on, so on. It goes deeper and deeper. But here's the interesting part. No matter how much you divide it, at some point, if you're down to the very, very, very essence, let's just say quarks, or don't make it too complicated. Let's just say neutron and proton. As you keep dividing it further, at some point, you get to a point where it's the very, very basic essence, and there's always something in between these two basic elements. That basic element, we say, oh, see, there's nothing there. Actually, there still is. That empty space that's supposed to, no matter how much you divide it, it's still not empty. It still has fields. That's where the Higgs field comes in. It's IGGS after some smart dude named something Higgs. So they say the universe, even if you take a box, that's why I use the box as an example, you take all the matter out of it. You take energy out of it. Because remember, Einstein said E is equal to mc squared. So energy by itself, it's still a factor or it's basically matter that's been converted, but it still has matter. So let's say you make this mind experiment, thought experiment. You take a box, you're able to extract all the matter out of it and all the energy out of it. It's still not empty. It's still filled with fields, and that's where they came up with Higgs field. They say the universe is actually filled with fields. Even if you remove all matter, there's still fields. And the funny part is this so-called field, every time consciousness or attention is put on a certain part of the field, it starts to change and form mass. You go, man, that is bizarre. That's what creation is. So imagine the universe has no matter, just fields. But there's some consciousness that's put attention to a certain part of the field, just put awareness into it, somehow that field start changing and start to form mass. There is a God. Make sense? So the soul, the spiritual self, same thing. Even though a lot of Buddhists say there's no I, there's no self. First of all, you have to understand it in the original context, which is a mistranslation by the later teachers. It's not because there's no self. It's one of two things. One, that what you call the self is simply an aggregate or a construct of all the thoughts and perceptions of what the self is supposed to be. As I mentioned earlier, a father, a son, a daughter, a mother, a body, a certain occupation. So these are constructs of what most people call the self. So most people around, that is their identity. That's why they have problems. Make sense? The other concept, which exists simultaneously, is when they say no self, anatta or anatma, means the teacher teaches the student, says, look, your body, you're observing it. So the body is not the self. You observe your body breathing. So the breath is not the self. You start observing that you have emotions and thoughts. So the observer notices the emotions and the thoughts were created. They're now being observed. So the observer is not what's being observed. The observer is not the phenomenon. So therefore the emotions, thoughts, these are not the self. But the problem is, if people don't think that deeply, they just follow blindly, they say, there is no self. No, it means that these are not the self. So anatta or anatma literally means not the self. There's no self. So without a teacher, there's a tendency to just follow blindly. There is no self. So if there's no self, there's no karma. You can do whatever heck you like. And you do good, nothing happens. Because there's no self. There's no generator of good karma or bad karma. There's no recipient of the good or bad karma. Make sense? So it's very, very important to fully understand this. Otherwise, a person walks around chanting, there is no self, there is emptiness, and yet they're a victim of it. Now, listen carefully. Going back to emptiness. So emptiness concept simply means that nothing or no substance in the universe is intrinsically has self-nature. Everything is a cause of everything. So when they say there's no self, they're saying the soul by itself doesn't have self-nature. Which you and I understand, which is true. The soul is part of the higher soul. The higher soul is part of your divine spirit, which intrinsically is part of God. That's that. It's very simple. So that's how you reconcile everything. So when a Buddhist starts arguing, there's nothing to argue because you're talking about two different things. The problem is if they're not aware enough, they haven't studied enough, they would say, oh, there is no self, unquote. If there's no self, who's talking to me? Get it? That's the difference of having teacher and no teacher. I'm not taking credit because it's not me. I learned it from my teacher. So now you understand when you say emptiness, it's very different than nothingness. That's why I remember many years ago, my teacher was giving a talk. He says, they say nothingness, emptiness, the void. Actually, emptiness is the wrong term. It's actually nothingness. I go, what? And then later on, I understand what he was saying. Emptiness is a concept in the Buddhist tradition that says nothing has self-nature. Everything that you see came from something. If you're a son, you're a daughter, you have parts of your father, parts of your mother in you. Make sense? That's that. So nothingness simply means devoid, devoid of matter. So going back to that nucleus, the electron, in between the electron and the nucleus, there's space. There's nothing there. Between the nucleus, in the nucleus, you have the neutron and the proton. You tear it all the way down. In between quarks and everything, there's still a space. That space is pure space. There's nothing there. Translation, there is no matter, but there's still fields. That field is made of energy with consciousness, but no mass. So within the universe, or in the universe, everything and nothing actually exists simultaneously. You go, wow, okay. Now my brain's about to explode. Here's the best news of all. When you do your meditation, I'm not the body, I'm not the emotion, not the thoughts, I'm the soul. Yeah, the I am affirmation taught by Grandmaster Tuak Hock Sui. I am a spiritual being of divine intelligence, love, and power. Okay, that means I don't have a body. I'm not the body. That means I, the soul, doesn't have mass. Even emotions and thoughts, these are not the I. So you're stripping away everything that's not the I. What's left? The I. And this I is part of a bigger I, the higher self. And this bigger self, just like every bigger self, everybody else, is connected to the universal I. That is God, the spiritual source of everything. But doesn't have matter. So at that point, you go back to the source. Now, why is this important? Let's talk about practical terms. As we have a deeper understanding of pure nothingness, we experience ourselves as pure energy with consciousness. As we connect with the higher self, divine spirit, connect with God, when we come back into our earthly existence, earthly consciousness, we take that sense of connectedness to all, oneness with all, then your perception of reality is different. Then you have a perception that I'm connected to everything. That part of me, the real I, which is now wearing a garment of the body, wearing a garment of emotions, wearing a garment of thoughts, as I move around, intrinsically is actually connected to all. That's what you call oneness. That's that. So the key is don't get stuck with the word emptiness. Emptiness simply a description that nothing has self-nature or intrinsic essence. It's a combination of everything. That's why the proper term is nothingness. Pure energy with consciousness. And this pure energy with consciousness is exhibited in science, that this so-called Higgs field that fills up the universe, every time a certain attention is put to a part of it, somehow it starts to produce mass and individualize. So that's what you call incarnation or individualization. Now you understand Science and spirituality are two sides of the same coin. That's it. Some of you go, what in the world just happened? Let's meditate. Put your hand like this. Beware of your crown. I am that. I'm not the body. I'm not the emotion or the thoughts. I am the soul. I am a spiritual being of divine intelligence, divine love, divine power. I am that. The soul, the spiritual self. My essence is pure nothingness. Just pure energy with consciousness. I am connected in one to my higher soul. I am connected in one to the divine spirit, the divine spark within me. I am a child of God, meaning we're still growing and evolving. Even though the self is pure and comes from God, the self is still evolving and learning. That's why we say, I am a child of God. I'm one with God, I'm one with all. That is my true essence. And so it is. Just be still. Remember your true essence. Pure, spiritual energy or nothingness. Just silently say, I am that I am. I am that I am. I am that pure nothingness in the universe. That is my true essence. I am that I am. Just be still. Just meditate on that pure nothingness. You strip off the body, any emotions and thoughts, what's left? It's a real I am. Meditate on that essence of that I am. There's nothing to grasp. There's no thought, there's no emotion, there's no body. Just pure existence. Be still. I am that. That am I. I am that. That am I. I am that. I am. Be still. Let go. Let go. Gently, slowly, very gently and slowly, come back to your physical form. Gently move your fingers, move your toes, slowly, gently come back. Now, open your eyes. I want you to observe your thoughts and your emotions. Observe everything around you. Notice anything different? Anybody notice that your consciousness, your awareness seems to be wider instead of being like this? You know why? It's as simple as this. When you meditate on your true essence, it's just like you temporarily remove the shell, the physical, the emotional, mental shell, allowing you to experience freedom. Your freedom as a being of pure energy with no mass. It's like being unleashed. Just like a light that has been capped and then suddenly you remove it, light radiates everywhere. Then when you come back into your daily life, it's just like you put on the shell again. Because you needed that shell to function the everyday life. Here's the difference. Without proper meditation and spiritual practice, we have a tendency to think, or no, not to think, we have a tendency to identify the I as the data coming from, or the data or the influence of the body, the emotions and thoughts. That becomes our identity. That's what it's constricting. But once you realize your true nature, you feel expanded. You become, it's just like a drop of water in the ocean experiences the entire ocean. Then you feel free and you feel unstoppable. That's that. Teaching very simple. That's why I opted not to do any other meditation, so you really see the value of what you just learned. Meditate on it. Okay? So, we'll stop right here for this session. On the next session, we'll dive a little deeper. We covered a lot in this. I highly recommend you rewatch it, take notes, and understand. Very, very important. This is part of your spiritual growth. That's why my teacher always says, don't take things blindly. You know, when spiritual teachings are given to you, do not take things blindly. Even, you take our courses, we always say, second slide. Analyze the information, do your experiments, make your own conclusion. I hope I never break this, but you'll never hear me say, just trust me. I've said that in class to keep reminding myself, don't ever say that, yeah, just trust me on this, because I could screw up. I could be wrong. Your truth should be based on what you learned, what you experienced to be true, not because I said so. We're just following what the Buddha taught many years ago. Do not believe it. just because tradition say so, just because scriptures say so, just because it's a fad, just because of tradition. And in the end, he says, don't believe it just because I said so. Every soul grows by studying, analyzing, learning, and experiencing. That's it. So let's give thanks to the Divine Supreme God, Divine Father, Mother. Thank you to all the spiritual elders, holy masters, to all the saints of all traditions, archangels, holy angels, and spiritual helpers. Personally, to my teacher, Master Sokhok Sui Mahaguji Mailing, we thank you for divine light, love, guidance. Thank you for healing, help, and divine protection. We thank you in full faith, and so it is. All right, so thank you very much for joining me. Now, I know a lot of you who have US addresses are joining me for Psychic Self-Defense tomorrow. And then Sunday's Inner Buddhism Revealed, which I'll go in more detail about the non-self. We'll talk about that on Sunday. If you haven't registered yet, I think the registration is closed. But if you email the office or call the office and you have a U.S. address, we'll see if we can still squeeze you in. Okay. Namaste, everyone. We'll take care. We'll see you for the second session. And we'll dive deeper into emptiness and nothingness. God bless. Bye-bye.